in order to come to a platform of understanding, Patanjali, he states that the sources, the actual sources of correct understanding, not of misconception, the opposite, correct understanding, are direct perception, inference, and the words, whether written or spoken, of self-realized authorities. This is a direct perception, if it is properly guided, is extremely helpful. We can come to understand truths. But we must accept that there are certain shortcomings that all people have. For instance, everyone can be subject to illusion. This is what makes it so that the guys with the big magic shows in Las Vegas, the illusionists, they're called illusionists, right? I mean, who are some of the famous guys? David Copperfield, Penn and Teller before, huh? David Blaine, all these guys, they are called illusionists because they will produce what looks to be a real experience, but it is actually an illusion that is created. And a common untrained person looks at it and they buy into it. Other forms of illusion, it was common in the old days when they would have sailing ships and people would be at sea for months at a time under very harsh conditions. People would start hallucinating that they see landforms on the horizon. And if they do not stay the course, they start heading towards these landforms. They can wander all over the ocean and perish. In desert environments, mirages actually appear. And people, particularly when their body and their minds are greatly stressed from lack of water, heat, lack of food, these type of things, or even if they're perfectly healthy, just because of the way that the waves of heat rise off the deserts, you can look and actually see bodies of water, an oasis, and you can run towards it, wanting to dive into it and end up with a mouthful of sand. And that is because it is an inherent, it is built in to the nature of the body, the mind, that we can be subject to illusion. Every person has a propensity towards cheating, unfortunately. We can convince ourselves of things that we want to believe in that are not actually true. We can try and convince others of things that are not true. This propensity to cheat ourselves and others exists. Our senses are all inherently imperfect. Even when you rely on devices to magnify the power of your senses, the senses are inherently imperfect, and so you can become mistaken. These are some of the natural characteristics that exist in the body and mind. And so while direct perception is important, it cannot truly be relied on alone. But when we speak of direct perception, it's more in the case of very fundamental things. For instance, a child looks at a candle or some fire or flame. What does a little baby want to do when they see fire? They want to touch it. It's like, wow, and they reach out immediately and want to touch. And what's the best way to teach a child not to touch a flame?
Let him touch it.
No, that's really cruel. You don't let them touch it. You hold their hand or their finger and you put it close, 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 so they can start feeling the heat and the burning sensation. Then they start resisting and they're trying to pull their hand back. When you feel them pulling the hand back, you know, okay, they've learned. And then next time they see it, they know what it is. If you actually burn yourself, then you become familiar with this idea that when you feel an intense heat close to the skin, that there is a danger of getting seriously hurt. And so you build a natural reaction that when your hand, even unconsciously, not looking, but you're reaching for something and it feels something hot, immediately as you pull it away. You have now this ability. You see something that's glowing hot and you can see the heat rising off it. And you know, I ain't going to touch that because I know what's going to happen. You can infer. So this process is actually part of the yogic process where you can have direct perception of things to learn the truth about them. There are limitations that go with it, but from that knowledge you can begin to infer. But the greatest or the easiest and best way to acquire truth is to learn from somebody that knows already. And a common person will go, well, I got to believe somebody else. No, it's not a question of a belief system. It's like when you go to college. Why do you go to college? Why do you sit in a class of some professor? Because he is going to present to you a whole body of accumulated knowledge, of other people's direct experience, of many people's inference, of his own experience and inference, and he is going to be able to present to you conclusive findings in a concise, in a very direct way, very effectively, very quickly. When people approach the learning process or they want to acquire knowledge through this particular means, they are able to learn in leaps and bounds. The same principle applies to the spiritual system, where when a person approaches a competent authority, a qualified and a highly experienced authority on the subject of the yoga sciences and spiritual knowledge, one is able to acquire a great depth of knowledge very quickly. Such teachers do not encourage simply mental learning. The whole yoga process is not a mental process. It is an experiential process where you are shown or delivered knowledge which you try to understand and appreciate, but then you must put it to the test. You must apply it to your life and experience the consequences or the result of that experiment in your life. So this is the way in which the yoga system is presented and understood and appreciated and practiced, more importantly.